What's up guys, this is Balázs from RacingBrick. As I mentioned earlier this week in my wheel and suspension test video, there seems to be a problem with the rear axle of the Mercedes-Benz Zetros, and I spent some time to investigate it in details. If you missed any of my videos about the set, then there's a playlist accessible in the top right corner. Oh, by the way, you wanted to see the truck with the wheels of the off-road buggy. Here it is. I don't think it looks particularly good, and the climbing performance is clearly worse than the original one. So, time to focus on the rear axle of the Zetros. As I showed you in my previous video, if you force the truck on an obstacle that it cannot climb with the differentials locked, then after a while the raw power of the motors can push the beam outwards that holds the black 12-tooth gear that drives the differential. As the gears won't mesh perfectly anymore, they start to jump and crack, and if you don't realign the beam, then on a longer term you will risk damaging the gears. I have to emphasize that this only happens if you don't care about the cracking and you purposefully push the truck for a longer time, so it's not the result of a sudden accident. I tried this so you don't have to. Here is the red differential gear with the damaged teeth. This one cannot be fixed, needs to be replaced. So what is really happening there? We have two perpendicular gears, there's the black one and then the red gear of the differential. As the black one tries to drive the red gear, the forces appearing try to push them away from each other. The black gear is supported by this 5-module long beam, and since it is practically only held in place by this red axle with friction pin, it cannot withstand those forces. Actually, the easiest way to make the cracking happen is to simply drive the truck against the wall. It happens almost instantly. One potential reason of the issue might be the variance in the friction of the axle pins used. I have some older grey ones instead of the red holding that problematic beam. I replaced it and now we can do a test. Holding the wheel seems to be promising, the beam does not get pushed out instantly. Now let's see the wall test. Unfortunately here the cracking appears very soon. You can see that the beam was apparently pushed out again, just like with the red axle pin. A quick test on the ramp gives us similar results. The cracking appears. For me, this means that although there might be a variance between the different pieces and their friction, meaning with older axle pins the cracking appears later, but at the end of the day, if the integrity of the structure only relies on these pins, then at some point the parts will be pushed apart and the cracking appears. So, how did this set made into production with this problem? Honestly, I don't know. I'm sure it was very strictly tested, but I cannot really imagine that this problem did not appear during testing if everything was exactly like this, so maybe something changed between the tests and the production version. But as you see, the fix is not that simple and should not only happen at that single point where the 5-stud long beam is connected. If you try to secure that one to the flip-flop beam next to it with this simple assembly and then try to grab the wheel, the cracking slowly but surely appears again, since the whole middle section tries to separate from the other side of the axle at multiple points. We spent a couple of hours with my good friend Attika to investigate the issue. I'm sure you know the guy and his builds. He is the master of these lightweight custom off-road vehicles. So we spent some time with the axle, trying to come up with a fix that does not require a complete rebuild. Here is the result. Let me explain the changes. First of all, one gear was removed from the drivetrain, the one that was held in place by that problematic 5-module long beam. By repositioning the black 12-tooth gear to the other side of the differential, we could spare a gear and still drive the differential in the proper direction. The benefit is to use the 5x7 frame as a support that should be more difficult to move. The other major change requires a support to be built on the back side of the axle using these cross blocks. This required some pins to be removed and replaced with axles. We will attach half beams to the cross blocks to firmly hold the two sides of the axle together and everything in between. These type of pins are used on purpose. They hold the half beam better in place than the slightly longer ones. Yes, the otherwise not great ground clearance is reduced even more, but that seemed to be the only way to hold things in place without a complete rebuild. Any other solution we tried that did not physically connect both sides of the axle had some cracking during the tests. So, what changed with this setup? Well, if I drive the truck against the wall, there's no cracking. It struggles, as you can see on the LED of the hub, and even slows down after a while due to the load, but no cracks. Actually, I think this is the case when the protection in the hub is supposed to shut it down, but as I mentioned earlier, this configuration is simply too powerful, a good reason why no axle motors are needed here. Here's the other test, the ramp. As you remember, it could climb 45 degrees previously, a little more was already too much and it started to crack after a while. Now check this out, 55 degrees and it still climbs. It slips a lot and takes some time to get traction, but slowly but surely it goes up. I think this is truly impressive. So, is this a foolproof solution? Obviously not. If you grab both wheels and give it full throttle, it can still crack. But as you see, I really need to hold both wheels and I need a third hand to push the throttle, so I use the powered up F for this. If I grab and hold only one wheel, then the motor simply rotates the rim in the wheel. So, under other circumstances that I would otherwise hardly call standard operation, like this one or this one, it still holds. A few thoughts before we wrap up. I think there was a good reason why LEGO did not make really powerful vehicles with power functions or powered up so far, and why most sets have safety features like open differentials or clutches. This is still plastic. If the system is too powerful and you block it, then something bad will happen at the weakest link. A quick example with this truck, do you know why that tow ball is secured with the green bar below it? Because without that reinforcement, it simply gets ripped out of the socket, and as you see, even the driving axle can pop out of the shaft. And we only have two of those so-called super weak powered up L motors in the system. I think it could have been a good opportunity to implement some safety features within the Control Plus app. For example, at full load, if the hub sensors don't detect much motion, meaning the truck struggles moving, then a warning could appear or even an automatic shutdown could happen. So, is this the only way to fix the problem? Definitely not. I'm sure people will find tons of other ways after the set is released. We wanted to test something that required only a few extra pieces but visibly improves the situation. Will the problem appear on every set? Well, I can't say for sure, probably. It does not seem to be an isolated issue, as I asked other reviewers and they had a similar experience, and from a structural perspective, if the assembly of the rear axle only relies on friction and the whole structure is not physically clamped together, then it cracks sooner or later. Will LEGO change the set? That's a good question. I only realized the problem after a longer period of testing when I really started to push the truck beyond its limits, so I don't think everyone would face it for sure. But since it is fairly easy to replicate even accidentally if you drive the truck straight against the wall, then it might happen to anyone, so a fix might be necessary, I think. We will definitely have to wait until some investigation happens on LEGO's side and the results are shared. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments, but please remain civilized. There's no point of personally blaming anyone. Remember, a LEGO set is not the product of a single person. If you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up. You can also subscribe and tap the notification bell if you don't want to miss my LEGO Technic reviews and other LEGO RC videos. See you next time, bye bye.